Take a walk through any major city in America today. New York, Los Angeles, Miami. Look at the dogs trotting happily on the sidewalks, riding in tote bags, or snoozing in sunny spots at outdoor cafes. You'll see a lot of different breeds, but chances are you'll see one more than any other. A small, stocky dog with a smooshed-in face, ears like a bat, and a comical, snorting way of breathing. That's right, the French Bulldog. In 2022, the American Kennel Club announced something that shocked the dog world. For the first time in 31 years, the Labrador Retriever was no longer America's most popular dog. It had been dethroned, and the new king, the new reigning monarch of American households, was the Frenchie, and it's held that top spot ever since. They are, by every metric, America's sweethearts. Celebrities have them. Your neighbors have them. They are the face of modern dog ownership. Compact, adaptable to city life, and overflowing with personality. But here's a question. As you watch one of these charming little dogs try to chase a pigeon before giving up for a nap, I want you to picture something else. Picture a wolf, a gray wolf, standing in the frozen tundra of the late Pleistocene, an apex predator, a creature of immense power, intelligence, and wildness. Its eyes glow in the twilight. It moves with a silent, deadly grace. It can track prey for 100 miles, survive the most brutal conditions, and work with its pack to bring down a bison. Now look back at the French Bulldog. How did we get from that to this? It seems impossible, doesn't it? Like a magic trick. How do you turn a wild, formidable hunter into a brachycephalic, bat-eared companion who can't swim and gets winded walking up a flight of stairs? This isn't just a story about one dog breed. It's the story of all dogs. It's a journey that spans tens of thousands of years, a story of evolution, survival, and the most extraordinary partnership our species has ever forged. This is the unbelievable scientific story of how wolves became dogs, and how, through one of the most intense and bizarre chapters of that story, we created the French Bulldog. To understand the French Bulldog, we have to rewind the clock. Not a few hundred years to the streets of Paris, but deep into the past. We're going back to the Ice Age between 15,000 and 40,000 years ago. At this time, two highly successful social predators roamed the cold, harsh landscapes of Eurasia, early modern humans and gray wolves. On the surface, they were competitors. Both hunted the same large prey, mammoth, bison, deer. Both lived in complex social groups, relied on cooperation, and were incredibly intelligent. A human hunter and a wolf might have seen each other as rivals, or even as threats. So how did this competition blossom into the greatest interspecies alliance the world has ever known? For a long time, the prevailing theory was what we might call the adoption or cub napping hypothesis. The idea was that our ancestors would find a litter of wolf pups, kill the mother, and bring the pups back to camp to raise them. The cutest, most docile ones would be kept, and over generations, they would become tamer. It's a nice story. It's just probably not true. Anyone who has been around wolf pups knows they are not just furry puppies. They are incredibly difficult to raise, destructive, and as they mature, their wild instincts kick in. It would have been an inefficient dangerous, and frankly, a pretty terrible way to start a partnership. Today, scientists favor a more elegant, more likely scenario. It's called the survival of the friendliest hypothesis, or more simply, the self-domestication theory. It didn't start with humans choosing wolves. It started with wolves choosing us. Think about a human settlement in the Ice Age. It's a hub of activity. There are fires for warmth, people butchering animals for food, and crucially, there's waste. A garbage dump of bones, scraps of meat, and other leftovers. For a wild animal, this is a fantastic, reliable source of calories. Now, imagine a pack of wolves. Most of them would be too afraid to get close to the humans. Their flight distance, the minimum distance they maintain from a threat, is very large. They see the fire, they hear the voices, and their instincts scream, "Danger!" But within any population of animals, there's variation. Just like some people are more adventurous than others, some wolves would have been naturally bolder or less fearful. These wolves might have had a slightly shorter flight distance. They might have dared to creep a little closer to the human camp to snatch a bone from the refuse pile. These less fearful wolves got a huge evolutionary advantage. They had access to a steady food source that their more timid packmates didn't. They were better fed, healthier, and more likely to survive and reproduce. And what trait did they pass on to their offspring? That same boldness, that same reduced fear of humans. Generation after generation, this process repeated. The wolves that were best at exploiting this new ecological niche, the area around human settlements, were the ones that thrived. They weren't being actively tamed by humans yet. They were, in a sense, taming themselves. They were evolving to fit into our world. The archaeological evidence supports this. One of the most profound discoveries is the Bonn-Oberkassel dog, found in Germany, dated to 14,000 years ago. It's the remains of a dog buried alongside two humans. Analysis of the dog's teeth shows it suffered from distemper as a puppy, meaning it would have been gravely ill. For it to have survived, it must have been cared for by the humans it lived with. This wasn't just a scavenger at the edge of camp. This was a member of the family, evidence of a deep, ancient bond. This is the survival of the friendliest theory, championed by researchers like Brian Hare. The key insight is that the primary trait being selected for wasn't strength or hunting prowess, but tameness, a lack of aggression and fear towards humans. And this one simple change had a cascade of unexpected consequences. In the 1950s, a Soviet geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev began one of the most famous experiments in the history of biology. He wanted to understand how wolves were domesticated. He couldn't use wolves. They were too slow to breed and too difficult to handle. So he chose a different animal, the silver fox. Belyaev and his team went to fur farms and selected foxes based on a single criterion, their reaction to humans. They approached each fox and tested its temperament. The ones that showed the least fear and aggression, the ones that might tolerate a gloved hand or even show curiosity, were selected to be the parents of the next generation. All other foxes were excluded from the breeding program. He repeated this process generation after generation. In each new litter, he selected only the friendliest, the tamest, the most dog-like foxes. The results were astonishing, and they came faster than anyone could have imagined. Within just a few generations, the foxes began to change. They started whimpering to attract attention, wagging their tails when they were happy. By the 10th generation, they were actively seeking out human contact, licking the scientists' hands, rolling over for belly rubs. But the truly mind-blowing part wasn't just the behavioral changes. The fox's physical appearance started to change too. Their coats began to show splotches of white, a trait called depigmentation. Their ears became floppier. Their snouts got shorter. Their tails started to curl. They began to look, for all the world, like puppies. What Belyaev had stumbled upon was a phenomenon called neoteny, or the retention of juvenile traits into adulthood. The foxes weren't just acting like puppies. They were starting to look like them. And all of this happened simply by selecting for one single trait: tameness. Scientists now believe that the genes controlling fear and aggression are linked to other genes that control physical development. The key lies in neural crest cells, a special type of embryonic cell that, in early development, migrates throughout the body. These cells contribute to forming many different parts of the animal, including the adrenal glands, which produce adrenaline, but also cartilage for the ears and snout, and pigment-producing cells in the skin. By selecting for tameness, Belyaev was inadvertently selecting for foxes with less active adrenal glands, and therefore changes in all the other body parts derived from those same neural crest cells. This is what happened to those first proto-dogs living on the fringes of human camps. As they became tamer, they also began to look different from their wolf ancestors. Their skeletons became smaller and lighter. Their snouts shortened. Their teeth got smaller. Their brains even shrank slightly, particularly the parts associated with the fight or flight response. They were becoming, in essence, permanent wolf puppies. This process created a new kind of canine, one that was not only comfortable around humans, but was biologically primed to communicate with us. Countless studies have shown that, unlike even human-raised wolves, dogs are uniquely skilled at reading human social cues. If you point at a hidden object, a dog will follow your gesture to find it. A wolf will typically just stare at your finger. This isn't something dogs learn. It's an innate ability, hardwired into their brains by thousands of years of coevolution. As humans transitioned from hunter-gatherers to farmers, the dog's diet changed with us. Genetic analysis shows that early dogs evolved extra copies of the gene AMY2B, a gene responsible for producing amylase, an enzyme that breaks down starch. Wolves, being strict carnivores, have only 2 copies, but dogs can have up to 30, allowing them to thrive on the starch-rich scraps from an agricultural human diet. They evolved alongside us at our table. This new creature, the domesticated dog, was no longer a wolf. It was something entirely new, a partner. Humans began to see the value in these animals. They weren't just cleaning up scraps. They could act as alarm systems, barking at intruders. They could help on the hunt, tracking and flushing out game. They provided warmth on cold nights and companionship. The alliance was sealed. For thousands of years, this was the status quo. Dogs were generalists. They were village dogs, camp dogs, land race breeds shaped more by their environment and their job than by any deliberate human plan. They were our partners. But then something changed. Humans got very, very interested in tinkering. For most of the 15,000-year history of dogs, they looked, well, pretty dog-like. If you look at drawings of dogs from ancient Egypt, Rome, or medieval Europe, they are mostly medium-sized, pointy-nosed, and look like the kind of mutt you might see at a local shelter. There were some variations, of course, sleek sighthounds for chasing prey, larger mastiff types for guarding, but nothing like the dizzying variety we see today. The great explosion of dog breeds is a surprisingly recent phenomenon. It really kicked off in the Victorian era, in the 19th century. The Victorians were obsessed with a few things: industry, empire, and classification. They wanted to categorize and improve everything, from plants in their gardens to pigeons in their coops. This was the era of the animal fancy, a new middle-class hobby focused on breeding animals to an exacting aesthetic standard. It was heavily influenced by the emerging and often misguided ideas of eugenics, the belief that you could improve a lineage through controlled breeding. This was the birth of the breed standard and the dog show. Suddenly, it wasn't enough for a dog to be a good hunter or a loyal companion. It had to look a certain way. A group of influential breeders would write up a detailed description of the ideal dog, the exact height, weight, coat color, ear shape, tail length, and then breed dogs in a relentless pursuit of that perfect standardized form. Form no longer followed function. It followed fashion. This is where artificial selection went into overdrive. Instead of the slow, semi-natural selection for tameness that created the first dogs, this was a highly targeted, human-driven process. We became the architects of canine evolution. We could take a single ancestral stock and, in just a handful of generations, create wildly different forms. We could select for long legs and get a greyhound. We could select for short legs and get a dachshund. We could select for a wrinkled face and get a pug. It was a demonstration of the raw power of selective breeding, and it is in this crucible of Victorian-era creationism that the story of the French Bulldog truly begins. But its roots go back even further, to some of the most fearsome dogs of the ancient world. The story starts with a people called the Molossians, who lived in ancient Epirus, a region in what is now Greece and Albania. The Molossians were renowned for breeding massive, powerful dogs, likely descended from war dogs of the Near East. These Molossian dogs were famous throughout the ancient world, praised by Aristotle and Virgil. They were used as guardians of livestock and as dogs of war. When the Roman Empire expanded, they encountered these dogs and were so impressed that they adopted them, refined them, and used them in their own legions and in the brutal spectacles of the arena. The Romans spread these Molossus dogs across Europe, from the sun-baked hills of Spain to the rainy shores of Britain. In Britain, these Roman Mastiff-type dogs became the ancestors of the English Bulldog. Now, the Bulldog we know today is a placid, often comical companion. But the original Bulldog was a different beast entirely. It was bred for one specific, brutal purpose, the sport of bull baiting. Bull baiting was a horrific blood sport where a bull was tethered in a ring and a pack of dogs was set upon it. The goal was for a dog to grab the bull by the nose and not let go. To create a dog that could succeed at this, breeders selected for a very specific set of traits. They needed a dog that was incredibly ferocious and tenacious, with an insane pain tolerance. They needed a dog that was low to the ground, making it a smaller target for the bull's horns. They needed a massive, powerful jaw and a strong, stocky body. The classic undershot jaw, where the lower jaw protrudes past the upper, was prized for giving the dog a more vice-like grip. And they needed one other crucial feature. The dog had to be able to breathe while clamped onto the bull's nose. This led breeders to select for dogs with shorter and shorter snouts, a trait known as brachycephaly. The idea was that a pushed-in face would allow the dog to breathe through its nose while its mouth was full. The wrinkles on the face were thought to help channel the bull's blood away from the dog's eyes. Every feature of the original bulldog was a weapon, honed for a bloody purpose. They were the gladiators of the canine world. Then, in 1835, everything changed. The British Parliament passed the Cruelty to Animals Act, and bull baiting was outlawed. The bulldog, a creature bred for a single, now illegal job, faced an existential crisis. It was on the verge of extinction. But some breeders saw potential in the dog's loyalty and strength, if only its ferocity could be toned down. They began a new breeding project to transform the bulldog from a fighter into a companion. At the same time, another trend emerged. Some breeders, particularly in the city of Nottingham, started creating a smaller, miniature version of the bulldog. These toy bulldogs weighed under 20 pounds and became popular mascots for the Nottingham lace workers. When the Industrial Revolution hit the English lace industry, many of these skilled workers lost their jobs. They sought work across the English Channel in Normandy, France, and they took their little companion bulldogs with them. In the working-class neighborhoods of Paris in the mid-19th century, these little English bulldogs became a novelty. They were tough, charming, and full of character. French breeders were fascinated. They started to cross the imported toy bulldogs with other local breeds. No one kept perfect records, so we can't be 100% certain, but it's widely believed they used local terriers to add a bit of spunk, and most importantly, pugs. The pug, another ancient brachycephalic breed from China, likely contributed to further shortening the snout and giving the new breed its compact, cobby body and big, round eyes. But this crossbreeding produced something new, something unexpected. Some of the puppies were born with ears that stood straight up like a bat's. At first, English breeders were horrified. This was not a proper bulldog ear. Bulldogs were supposed to have rose ears, which are small and folded, but the French breeders and the Parisian public loved them. They thought the bat ears gave the dogs a unique, quizzical, and charming expression. They began to select specifically for this trait. And so, a new breed was born, the Bulldog Français, the French Bulldog. The Frenchie became the dog of the moment in Parisian society. They were adored by everyone from butchers and coachmen to the artists and aristocrats of the Belle Époque. The famous painter Toulouse-Lautrec included them in his work. The author Colette wrote lovingly of her Frenchies. King Edward VII of England even owned one. They were the companions of choice for the belles de nuit, the ladies of the Parisian nightlife. They were a symbol of a certain kind of bohemian, artistic, modern life. The breed's fame soon spread to America. Wealthy Americans on the grand tour of Europe saw these fashionable little dogs and brought them home. An American French Bulldog Club was formed in 1897, and in a show of nationalistic pride, they were the ones who cemented the breed standard, insisting that the bat ear was the only correct type, unlike the English who still preferred the rose ear. The French Bulldog had arrived, but its journey was far from over. For most of the 20th century, it was a relatively rare breed, a niche choice for discerning owners. It wasn't until the 21st century that its popularity exploded into the stratosphere. Why? The reasons are a perfect storm of modern life. They are a perfect size for smaller homes and apartments. They don't need a huge amount of exercise, which fits our increasingly sedentary lifestyles. They rarely bark, another plus for city living. And in the age of social media, they are incredibly photogenic. That flat face, those big eyes, that expressive comical look, it's pure Instagram gold. The French Bulldog is, in many ways, the dog we have bred for the world we have built. But the story doesn't end there, because the very traits that make the French Bulldog so popular, the traits we have so carefully and deliberately selected for, have come at a tremendous cost to the dogs themselves. The defining feature of the Frenchie is its head, the brachycephalic skull. That cute, smooshed-in face is the result of a dramatic shortening of the bones of the snout. But while the bones have shrunk, the soft tissues inside have not. The dog still has the same amount of soft palate, tongue, and other tissues as a dog with a normal-length snout, all crammed into a much smaller space. This leads to a condition called brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome, or BOAS. This isn't a single defect, but a collection of anatomical problems. It includes stenotic nares, meaning narrowed slit-like nostrils that restrict airflow. It includes an elongated soft palate, where the fleshy tissue at the back of the roof of the mouth is too long for the shortened face, so it dangles into the airway, causing obstruction. It's why Frenchies snore, snort, and grunt. It's not just a cute quirk. It's the sound of them struggling to breathe. Their airways are partially obstructed at all times. This is why they overheat so easily. Dogs cool themselves by panting, and Frenchies can't pant efficiently. It's why they can't handle strenuous exercise. For many, every breath is a battle. Their large heads and narrow hips, another result of selective breeding, mean that the vast majority of French Bulldogs cannot give birth naturally. The puppies' heads are simply too large to pass through the mother's birth canal. Over 80% of Frenchie litters are delivered via cesarean section. A species that cannot reproduce without surgical intervention is, from a biological standpoint, on a very precarious ledge. They are also prone to a host of other issues. The characteristic screw tail is often caused by a genetic defect called hemivertebrae, malformed wedge-shaped vertebrae that can lead to instability in the spine, causing pain, weakness, and even paralysis. They suffer from skin allergies in their facial folds and eye problems because their shallow sockets leave their large eyes exposed and vulnerable. The very things we find cute about them, the flat face, the wrinkles, the stocky body, are the source of their chronic health problems. This is exacerbated by what's known as the founder effect and genetic bottlenecks. When a new breed is created from a small number of founding dogs, and the stud book is closed, the genetic diversity is drastically reduced. Harmful recessive genes that might be rare in the general dog population can become common very quickly. We haven't just created a popular dog breed. We have created a breed that is, in many cases, anatomically and genetically destined to suffer. Veterinary associations around the world have raised alarms. In countries like the Netherlands, they have passed laws restricting the breeding of extreme brachycephalic dogs. They argue that it is fundamentally unethical to continue to breed animals with a conformation that is so detrimental to their welfare. The emotional and financial toll on owners who have to manage these chronic conditions can be immense. And so, we find ourselves at a crossroads. The journey from the wolf to the French Bulldog is a masterpiece of artificial selection. It's a testament to the deep bond between humans and dogs, and our ability to shape life to our own desires. But it's also a cautionary tale. It shows how our pursuit of a specific aesthetic, our idea of what is cute or desirable, can have devastating unintended consequences. The wolf is a marvel of natural selection, perfectly adapted to its environment. The French Bulldog is a marvel of human selection, perfectly adapted to our modern sensibilities. But in reshaping this animal to fit our world, have we broken it? In our love for the breed, are we perpetuating a cycle of suffering? There are no easy answers. But as the French Bulldog continues its reign as America's most popular dog, it's a question we have a moral obligation to ask. The story of this little dog is the story of our power to create and our responsibility for what we have made. It's a story that began around a flickering fire in the Ice Age, with a brave wolf who dared to step into the light. And it's a story that is still being written by us today.